What's the worst thing you've witnessed at a wedding? Only horrible for one person. The main hostess for the reception of about 30 guests. She carried in the 3-tier wedding cake, rather than using a cart. She not only dropped it, but fell face first into it on the floor. First dead silence, then a few giggles, and then her emotional breakdown like I have never seen before. She was completely devastated from both the embarrassment and ruining that special moment. We all eventually assured her that we're half drunk and don't care about the cake. The best part was that she easily collected $1,000 more in tips than she would have had that not happened.
That's a rough moment for her. It's never easy to deal with something so public, especially at a wedding. People initially laughed, but it turned into a real struggle for her. At least by the end, she walked away with more tips than expected. Sometimes, a disaster can turn into something positive. It's all about perspective in those moments.
I've only been to one wedding, and it was Dad's cousin's wedding. My dad's uncle, the groom's father, did a toast when the groom and bride were at the altar. Is this normal? Everyone around me seemed confused, and he said, "I'm glad I made it out here today. I just want you guys to know that I have cancer, and I'm going to die soon. Congrats to my son and his beautiful bride. Enjoy your time." Everyone was in complete silence. It was the most awkward thing I've possibly ever witnessed. For what it's worth, this was in 2008, and the groom's father is still alive.
That's quite a memorable wedding experience. It's surprising how some people choose to express their feelings at events like that. It must have been tough for everyone to respond. You expect celebration, and then someone just drops a heavy truth bomb. Shows how unpredictable family gatherings can be. Glad to hear the groom's father is still around after that. Makes for a bizarre story to share later on.
I've shared this before, and in the end it turned into a story to retell, but the pastor officiating my wedding had a heart attack, and my now wife and I caught him as he fell. We have video of my wife, in her wedding dress, consoling the pastor's wife, who was in tears behind the podium. One of my groomsmen is an ER doc and handled the situation well, and the pastor finally came back around. He was stubborn and insisted on finishing the ceremony, through the sound of sirens of the ambulance coming for him. Then my brother, best man, passed out minutes later. Apparently he had put on the wrong collared shirt and it was too tight around the neck. At least the EMTs had something to do while the pastor finished up. My brother spun and handed the rings off to ER doc groomsman as he fell, and my wife and I just busted up laughing at that point.
That's wild. A wedding day you won't forget for sure. It's crazy how things turn so unexpected, but you guys handled it with humor. The image of your wife in a wedding dress comforting the pastor's wife is something. And your brother passing out because of a tight shirt is just a strange twist. At least you had some laughter to lighten the mood. Definitely a story to tell for years.
Ex-girlfriend of the groom showed up at the wedding, uninvited and drunk. He broke up with her 10 years earlier and has not seen her in over 8 years. She was loud and saying very perverted thing about what she wanted to do to the groom. The bride steps up, goes all out, and punches the ex in the face, knocks the ex out cold. The bride we know is a normally calm and peaceful person. A few of us carry the ex out of the reception and drop her at her apartment about 20 minutes away. Bride told my wife that there is nothing that will ruin my wedding day.
That's quite a scene. You think you know how a wedding will go, but then an ex shows up out of nowhere. It's wild how the bride flipped from calm to ready to throw down. I guess she really meant it when she said nothing would ruin her day. That whole situation must have left everyone in shock. Carrying the ex out just adds to the craziness of the day. Definitely one for the books.
Oh, I got one. I went to the wedding of two good friends. Bride was neglected/abused by her mom as a child, but decides to invite her as an attempt at reconciliation. So we're at the reception part of the evening. Mom is talking to bridesmaid, and no one knows what prompted this. says to her, "Well, I guess it's a good thing you can't have kids, isn't it?" Bridesmaid bursts into tears. Bride grabs a knife to threaten Mom. Someone stops her. Mom is bundled in a car by her partner, and they disappear into the night.
That's quite a heavy story. Weddings can be emotional, and family dynamics often complicate things. It's tough seeing friends go through that kind of tension. The bridesmaid's reaction shows how deep the wounds can be. It's just wild how moments of joy can turn into something so chaotic, and the bride's instinct to defend her friend really says a lot. Glad someone stepped in before things got worse.
Definitely my friend's wedding last year. They had only known each other for 6 months or so before they got married. She was Mormon, he was atheist. We all thought it was really weird. The parents of the bride and groom hated each other. 2 moms got into a verbal argument. Then it became physical. I don't know who made the accusation, but one said they're only getting married because she's knocked up. And she popped a baby out 6 months later trying to pass it off as a preemie. You know.
That wedding was something else. It's wild how people can rush into things. The whole family drama was a mess, like watching a soap opera in real life. You think you know what's going on, then boom, someone throws a punch. And yeah, kids are a big reason for some weddings, but pretending? That's just messy. It's a good reminder that love can be complicated.
I went to a wedding with my boyfriend a few years ago. His friend was marrying a woman that no one liked. She was awful. During the ceremony, we could all tell that the best man was uncomfortable. As soon as the ceremony ended, the best man burst into tears for about 10 minutes and had to excuse himself. You could tell he just realized that his best friend was gone forever. We tried to cheer him up and reassure him that him and the groom would still be close, and that the bride wasn't too bad. Everyone present knew it was a lie, and we were all just so depressed. Later, the bride came and yelled at our entire group, all of her husband's friends, because we weren't dancing enough. We weren't dancing because they had no DJ, just a short playlist with the couple's favorite, not Dance Why, songs being played on repeat. I think throughout the whole night we heard playlist start and end about 5 times.
Sounds like quite the wedding. You can tell when people are just not feeling it. The best man's breakdown must have been something else. It's tough watching a friend walk into a situation like that. And the bride yelling at everyone about dancing with that playlist? That's a wild move. Honestly, it seems like everyone was just trying to survive the night. Definitely not the vibe you hope for at a wedding.
They had practiced their opening dance, a tango, in a large room. The wedding venue was a long and narrow, small room, so 1 step forward in tango style, 3 steps forward but trampling in place due to guests sitting in their way, 3 steps backward, trampling in place again to take 2 steps back to reach the other side guest and start trampling in place again. And right in the middle of all this, the kitchen starts bringing out food. They hadn't served any food before, so this was after complaints from most guests about being hungry. So I have video and photos, I was photographer, of the couple trampling, with no guest at all watching them. Not even the bride's mother, who was destroying a pack of fries with her back turned to the couple's opening dance.
This sounds like a classic wedding moment. I remember a friend who planned a grand first dance, but it ended up being a struggle with everyone crowding around. They basically danced in place. The guests were more interested in snacks than the couple. The photos turned out funny though, capturing the couple's effort while people were munching away. It's one of those memorable moments that everyone laughs about after.
The DJ got so drunk that she couldn't even stand. She didn't have the bride's wedding song, so a group of people all joined hands and tried to sing the song, some random country crap, for her, and she just stood in the middle of the circle crying in her dress, and no one knew the lyrics. And her father got wasted and started a fight which ended with him destroying a stop sign with his fists. Let's not forget that us and the wedding party got picked up in a NASCAR stretch limo. Classy, classy, classy Florida.
Sounds like quite a chaotic wedding. The DJ being so out of it, and the spontaneous group sing-along must have been a sight. It's wild how weddings can go off the rails, especially with a drunk father starting fights. And a NASCAR stretch limo? That's a unique touch to the whole scene. Definitely not the typical wedding experience. Florida really knows how to keep it interesting, I guess.
The ceremony for my cousins, the groom, wedding had the most obnoxious priest. I think he was related to my cousin or a longtime family friend. The whole ceremony became about him. Before every reading, he would explain what was about to be read for like 5 minutes. Then after the reading, would explain it again for another couple minutes before explaining the next reading. He gave terrible advice like, if you're having problems, don't talk to each other, talk to me. You have my number. He mentioned multiple times how he had recently moved to Illinois, where the wedding was taking place. Even between the vows, he had to throw his 2 cents in. After my cousin said, I do, he made some comment about, oh, I thought you were going to do it with more gusto like when you're cheering for the Bears. Ido. At the end, he just had to mention himself one more time. And by the power vested in me by the state of Illinois, which I am now a resident of, I now pronounce you man and wife. What could have been a 30 to 45-minute ceremony ended up taking 75 to 90 minutes.
I once went to a wedding with a similar vibe. The officiant just wouldn't stop talking about himself. Every reading turned into a personal story or a random joke. The couple seemed visibly uncomfortable. By the time they got to the vows, it felt like the ceremony was more about him than them. It dragged on way too long. I think everyone was relieved when it finally ended and we could move on to the reception.
It was only marginally bad and mostly funny, but at some point during the ceremony, the best man took a step backward on the altar to allow the priest to walk past, right into a candle that was behind him. Ended up setting his light blue, yeah, this was a 90s suit jacket on fire. It was quickly put out, happily with no injury to him other than a lost deposit on a tux and a charred shirt. Except he spent the rest of the day looking like he'd taken a mortar round directly between the shoulder blades. Much hilarity.
That's a classic wedding moment. The best man just trying to be helpful and walks right into a disaster. It's good it didn't turn serious. I can imagine everyone trying to keep a straight face while also cracking up at the sight of him looking charred. Those are the moments that make events memorable. Just a funny story to tell for years, and I bet he has a lot of laughs about it now.
The groom's sister got sorority girl wasted in the limo on the way to the reception. She stashed a brown paper bag with 2/5 of pucker under her chair for the Lord's Prayer. She held my hand the entire time, chanting, I need to pee. She drank heavily all through the meal and then caught the bouquet. The guy that caught the garter had his head shoved up her dress while he was putting it on her. Once he finally emerged from her cavern of drunk doom, he was bright red and ran away. She chased him around and literally flung herself at him to dance, aka grope him in front of everyone. She got bored with that and started dancing on the DJ's table. The bride was mortified and in all but tears, so her brother picked up this drunk mess and tried to carry her outside. This sent the redneck boyfriend into a rage, and he picked a fight with the brother. The cops were called. I just sat there wishing I had popcorn to watch the mess.
That's quite the scene. A wedding brought down into chaos by one person's wild night. You'd think everyone would be focused on the couple, but instead, it turned into a drama show. The groom's sister really took center stage. It's funny how quickly things can spiral out of control in a party setting. Sometimes you just want to sit back and watch it all unfold. Makes for a memorable story, that's for sure.
My aunt's second wedding. She married the guy who lived 2 houses down from her. That's not the issue. The worst part was the toast at the reception. Another neighbor got up. I want everyone to raise their glasses. 15 years ago, we all moved into this neighborhood married to the wrong people. By the end of the summer, we will all be married to the right people. Came to find out 8 couples had gotten divorced and remarried within the neighborhood, or as I call it, played musical spouses. We left very quickly.
Seems like a weird situation. Your aunt's wedding turned into a reunion of sorts for people who changed partners. That toast was definitely awkward, making everyone think about how many people switched around. I guess some neighborhoods have their own dynamics. It's probably good you didn't stick around for more of that. Kind of makes you rethink the whole idea of community, huh?
At a wedding of a college friend of my husband's, we learned that the bride, his old friend, had been in love with him for over a decade. We learned this from the women at our table at the reception. We introduced ourselves while we waited for the bride and groom to arrive. They were horrified that we were there, and extremely worried. My husband had no idea that she had feelings for him. She beelined right for our table after the introducing Mr. and Mrs. Thing, ignoring her family and leaving her husband standing alone. She clung to my husband and sobbed, lifting her head to glare at me. She had to be pulled off of him. She repaired herself, then followed us as we tried to leave quietly. Her parting shot was to stare at my chest and say, "Well, I guess I know what I was missing all along." Her new husband was in shock, and my husband was horrified and embarrassed. He was completely clueless and would never have gone to the wedding if he'd known she was obsessed with him. It was bizarre.
That sounds really awkward. It's strange to think someone could hold on to feelings for so long without ever saying anything. I can imagine how uncomfortable the whole situation was for everyone involved. Seeing a person cling to your partner like that must have been shocking. It's tough when feelings from the past come crashing into the present. Definitely not the kind of wedding memory anyone wants. Just a weird and tense moment.
The groom was a pastry chef by trade. As you can imagine, he went full bore on his own wedding cake. This thing was a masterpiece, astoundingly beautiful and intricate, and unlike anything you've ever seen. And the couple's friends are also about 50% pastry chefs. Lots of professional bakers in the place, all of whom were dying to see this piece of culinary art. The caterer's assistant dropped the cake in the kitchen before it ever saw the light of day. The only people who saw the cake in its full glory were me, the groom, the best man, the caterer, and the groom's baking staff. I was watching when it was dropped, and the person who dropped it said, "Well, we'll just serve the sheet cake." There was no sheet cake. They scooped up most of it and served it with a giant spoon.
That cake sounded like a big deal. I can only imagine how everyone felt when it got dropped. Seeing something so impressive destroyed must have been rough for the groom, especially with all the pastry chefs around. Serving it with a spoon really just shows how things can quickly turn to chaos. At least they made the best of it, but I bet it was a moment no one will forget.
My mom used to work at a catering company. The company would make an announcement about what food would have nuts in them and other things. Well, apparently, this one-time adder, they announced the food on lady walked right up and had like a peanut butter cookie and went into anaphylaxis. So they called an ambulance and she died on the way to the hospital. Apparently, she knew full well what was in it.
That's a tough situation. It's wild how sometimes people make choices that can have serious consequences, especially when it comes to allergies. You'd think that knowing the risks would matter more. Just goes to show that life can be unpredictable. It's a reminder to always be aware of what you're putting in your body.
A college friend met a girl through a dating service. They had a very rocky on and off relationship. Still, they end up getting engaged and we attend the wedding. Other college buddies and I make jokes about how long marriage will last. During the ceremony, when the couple is lighting the unity candle, the wick actually splits in two, leaving two separate flames. Like the universe was telling them this ain't happening. However, it's been over 20 years now, and they're still together and going strong.
It's funny how things turn out. We were all joking about how long they'd last during the wedding, especially with that candle incident. But here we are, 2 decades later, and they're still going strong. Life's like that sometimes. You expect one thing but get another. I guess sometimes those rocky starts can lead to solid finishes.
My cousin got married ages ago. She was a religious Jew and had apparently made 100% sure the DJ didn't play the traditional wedding march as it was made by a Nazi anti-Semite. Strike one, they played that song. There is video of her looking furious as it began. Strike two, the rings didn't fit. Not like this is tight, but like, I am a size 8 and this is a 4. Her fingers started changing colors due to poor circulation. Strike three, the officiant got their names wrong. Strike four, the officiant took a step back on the dais, and there was no more dais. He took a nasty spill off the stage mid-ceremony. My cousin and her husband have been together for almost 25 years now, so obviously these became funny stories to tell and not disasters.
That's quite a wedding saga. It's interesting how something that seems disastrous at the moment can turn into funny stories later on. The whole DJ mishap and the rings not fitting really added to the chaos. And the officiant falling off the stage? That's something you'll probably never forget. It just shows how unpredictable weddings can be. Glad it all worked out for them in the end.
Wedding went well. Reception went well, for the most part. Various family members gave speeches, along with members of the bridal party. It was a non-traditional wedding, so the maid of honor was a man. At his turn at the microphone, he basically confessed his love for the bride and explained how the groom would not be able to treat her as well as he could.
That's a pretty interesting twist for a wedding. The maid of honor's speech must have caught everyone off guard. It's not every day you see someone laying it all out like that. I guess it made the reception memorable, though. Can't imagine how the groom felt hearing that. Definitely a moment people will talk about for a while. There's always something unexpected at weddings, huh?
I have a lot of cousins. Last year my female cousin got married. She wanted a traditional ceremony, so they opted for a Catholic church with a minister. Well, the minister thought it was appropriate to talk about suicide, rape, adultery, and the X-Men movie right before the vows. It was so inappropriate our family had our mouths hanging open the entire time.
That sounds like a wild wedding. It's usually a time for joy and celebration. Pretty surprising when a minister introduces heavy topics during such a big moment. I can imagine everyone was just trying to process what was happening. Probably not the vibe anyone expected at a wedding. Must have made for some interesting conversations afterward, though.
My fiancé's old friend's wedding last year. They had a pyramid of cupcakes for guests and a small cake for the bride and groom. And people started coming up and grabbing cupcakes before the bride and groom cut their cake. My fiancée and her friends included. They tried to offer me one, but I refused to touch it before the couple cut their cake. They knew why, but everyone else is grabbing one, and we want one before they're gone.
It's funny how some people just dive in without thinking. I remember being at a similar wedding where the cake was the main event. Everyone was eyeing it, but I held off like you did. It's all about respect for the couple's moment. In the end, I got my slice, and it was worth the wait. Hope they learn that patience can sometimes pay off, even if it means missing out at first.
At one wedding I attended, there was a ceremonial gifting of a shotgun to the married couple from the family of the groom. Came out of nowhere, and the entire room was sat in stunned silence until the most awkward, "Are we supposed to clap?" applause nervously quivered into existence. What's scary is that both the bride and groom are extremely heavy drinkers, borderline alcoholics, and the groom in particular gets very aggressive when drunk. I can't think of a worse couple to give a firearm to. To their credit, the wedding was gorgeous apart from that. Great food and drink, stunning location, and killer cocktails.
That sounds like a wild wedding. A shotgun as a gift is not something you see every day. The awkwardness in the room must have been intense. It's strange to think about the couple's drinking habits paired with that kind of gift. The contrast between an elegant wedding and such a surprising gesture really stands out. At least the food and cocktails were good, right?
My cousin had his wedding at a family member's house, which backed up to a large swamp area. It was the middle of summer, so everything had dried out. During the reception, I heard someone yelling and turned around to see one of my degenerate second cousins come running up the path from the swamp area, followed by 10-foot-high flames. Turned out he wanted to see if a cattail, the plant, could catch on fire. It could, and the bride and groom were told that they would be charged $10,000 if the fire department had to come out again. Edit. Clarified a plant versus an animal tail.
That's wild. I can only imagine the chaos. A wedding should be a chill time, not a fire hazard. That second cousin really took things too far, just to test out a plant. The $10,000 charge is absurd, though. Makes you wonder if they'll ever invite him again. It's one of those family stories that gets retold every few gatherings, I bet. Just another reason family events are unpredictable.
My father-in-law goes up to give the speech for the parents of the groom, my wife's brother's wedding. He is rambling on, then starts talking about how he's always been super attracted to his son's now wife. You could have heard an ant scratching its ass, it went so silent. I wanted to smack him.
That's definitely an awkward moment. It's surprising how some people don't read the room. You'd think a wedding speech would be about celebrating love, not making everyone uncomfortable. I can imagine the looks on everyone's faces when he went off script like that. It must have made the rest of the event pretty tense. Sometimes, a little self-awareness goes a long way.
One of my childhood friends married a biker. Amazing couple, still good friends with them, but their wedding was something else. The wedding was in her parents' front lawn. They had to take down a fence so the bridal party could ride up on their Harleys. During the vows, the best man lit a smoke and blew smoke on the preacher guy. Many crazy things happened, but the best was at the reception where this little crazy French girl got angry with her huge husband, took off her stiletto heel, and embedded it in his forehead. It took 5 large biker guys to contain this 90-pound girl till the cops could get there. She was like a badger on meth. The amount of blood that came out of this guy's head was impressive. The bride got blood all over her white dress, and they had to use mops to sop it all up. He went to the hospital, she to jail, and we kept drinking.
That sounds wild. Weddings can get pretty unexpected. Your friend's wedding with the bikes and the crazy stuff definitely takes the cake. That moment with the stiletto heel is something you'd never forget. Can't imagine the chaos at the reception. It's pretty crazy how a day meant for celebration can flip so quickly. At least the party continued, right? Just goes to show every wedding has its own story.
My wife and I went to her cousin's costume wedding. We got there 45 minutes early, and as we were walking through the parking lot, the bride storms out of the hotel, yells the wedding is off, gets in her car and drives off, leaving 20 or so costume people in the parking lot, while being threatened by the groom's family that if we, her family, don't leave, they will call the cops. Fast forward a couple years. The groom-to-be marries my wife's sister and becomes my brother-in-law. Edit. The cousin did not attend. To make matters worse, they have a kid, and he pays her child support every month. There was no costume theme, which was great, because there was an elderly couple dressed as horny devils, I think. Eddie, too, messed up the last edit.
That sounds pretty wild. Imagine being all dressed up and then witnessing a wedding fall apart right in front of you. It's kind of funny that the groom ended up marrying your wife's sister later on. Life takes some strange turns. And yeah, the whole situation with the kid and child support makes it even weirder. The costume aspect just adds a layer of absurdity to it all. Plus, those devils sound like an interesting sight.
My mom told me a story where she was in her teens at a wedding. Anyways, one of the mothers in the corner randomly stood up and said, "I have an announcement to make. Little Jimmy's going through puberty." That kid was super embarrassed for a long time about it. That mother is pretty stupid to say such a thing at wedding.
It's wild how some people just don't know when to keep things to themselves. That poor kid must have felt like everyone was staring at him. It's a tough age already. When adults say things like that, it just makes the situation worse. Weddings are supposed to be about celebration, not putting someone on blast. Just goes to show how awkward family events can get sometimes.
They had this host of the wedding, and before the ceremony, he went to the bride and groom separately and asked them to write down their best memory. They had been dating for 5 or 6 years, and they had both been previously married after the main ceremony. That host took the microphone and started to talk about some things that he had learned about the newly married couple. Then he brought out the best memory that each one had written down. The bride wrote about their trip to England. The groom wrote about their trip to Paris and how their midnight kiss at the Eiffel Tower was magical. She had never been to Paris.
That host's approach was interesting. Having the couple share their best memories added a personal touch to the ceremony. It's kind of wild that the groom's favorite memory included a trip she never took. Highlighted the difference in their experiences. Made me think about how people carry their pasts into new relationships. Connections can be complex, blending memories and feelings from different chapters. It's all part of being human, I guess.
My cousin got married last summer. It was all shaping up to be a beautiful day. A, the groom substituted awfully for lawfully in his vows. This was more hilarious than offensive. B, the best man was beaten up by his drunk girlfriend at the reception. He promptly broke up with her, understandably saying that if their genders had been reversed, it would have been completely unacceptable. She didn't understand his reasoning. They got back together a few weeks later. We still worry about him.
Sounds like quite the wedding. The vows mix-up is pretty memorable, a funny moment for sure. The best man's situation is more concerning, though. It's wild how things can escalate at these events. It's good to hear he's got friends who care about him, even if he went back to her. Hopefully, he figures things out for himself soon. Weddings really do bring out all sorts of moments.
I went to a wedding where part of the head table collapsed. It was 3 or so long tables next to each other. I guess the table on the far right wasn't secure, and at some point gave way. Nothing huge happened. You could see the shock on the bride's face, but it was cleaned up and the evening was great. I talked to the groom a few weeks after, and he had said to his bride something along the lines of, "Look, it happened. There's no changing that. We can either let this ruin the wedding or get past it and have a great reception." They're awesome folks. Glad to say that was the worst thing I've seen at a wedding.
That's one way to make a wedding memorable. Guess it could have been worse. The couple's reaction says a lot about them. Instead of dwelling on the mishap, they chose to focus on enjoying the moment. It's nice to see people handling unexpected situations like that. Makes the whole thing more real. At least they can look back and laugh about it now. Good to hear it all turned out fine in the end.
Please consider subscribing if you enjoyed. Love.